We look at Black students and Hispanic students and Native American students.
We are inferior, and
we pity them.
That's what makes my blood boil. I mean, it's just, I am not less than you because you are white. I don't need you to look at me and feel bad for me because of the color of my skin. And that's effectively what you're doing every time you take an application and you say, oh, well, this girl's Black, so I kind of feel bad for her, so I'm going to put her at the top of a line. It's just not necessary. I believe, right, that Black Americans are capable of performing in the same capacity as their white peers. You two don't actually believe that, because if you support affirmative action, you are basically saying that Black Americans cannot do it on their own.
No, what I'm saying is that there's a history of racism and exclusionary practices, and it says we're reducing it all the way down just to race. And what these admissions practices are actually doing is saying, no, there's a constellation of factors that we're considering in the holistic review of this application.
So remove race from the applications.
Is basically making it about race. You're saying these are the Black people, these are the white people, these are the Asian people, these are the Native American people, as you mentioned. But as one of the audience members said, what about people who are of mixed race? You know, I'm of mixed background. What am I supposed to mark on an application? Am I supposed to mark multiple boxes? And plus, if you are painting people as an oppressor, if you're white, and then saying that you're oppressed.
Well, it's the truth because you believe in affirmative action. So I said mark Black. If you're a student, I'm in an interracial relationship, so I can speak to this. I have a son that's half white and a son that's half Black and a daughter that's half white and half Black. Okay. They're going to mark Black because I know that there are people like you at the universities who will say, well, because this person is Black, I'm just going to let them in.
Candace Owens torches a woke professor. On Dr. Phil, let me tell you, this one is fiery and you don't want to miss it. Let's take a look. If you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's watch, folks.
No, they're going to mark Black because they're Black.
Well, they're half Black and half white. They're both, right? So it is true. You overlook interracial students.
But
so what do you mean? Why are you saying they're going to mark Black
socialized in our society?
So the answer is if you can't. I mean, you can mark both. Can you mark both? I don't know if you can. Yes. What are you going to look at that applicant as a little bit less because they're half white? How do you guys figure that out?
How they look at it is, again, holistically across a number of different factors.
I love me a buzzword. Holistically and racial consciousness.
Oh yeah, reverse discrimination. It's
not reverse discrimination. It's just discrimination. It's just racism if you're judging people on the basis of their skin color. I don't know why this is so difficult. I mean, you have to go through an extraordinary amount of school. You almost have to have a PhD to not be able to see this.
Well, we're talking about holistic admissions, and we're talking about how that. And I know you don't like that word, but that's just true. That's what it's called. Or comprehensive. You can call it that too. Ultimately, what those are doing, they're looking at multiple factors. Again, it's trying to get at drive and determination. Let me finish real quick. So if someone mentioned earlier that, well, this gentleman here, we should be thinking about how there are other challenges that are happening earlier on. I would argue that those other challenges earlier on are a function of school systems from the very beginning that serve to disadvantage these students. So the very fact that a student gets...
Candace is making a solid point, and I get why she's so fired up about this. She's basically saying, don't look at me and assume I need help just because of the color of my skin. And honestly, that makes sense. Nobody wants to feel like they're being put at the front of the line because someone feels bad for them. It's insulting.
Welcome conservative author and TV host Danielle D'Souza-Gill and distinguished professor of education at San Diego State University, Dr. Luke Wood. So welcome to both of you. Now, let me start with you. Is it possible for white people to be discriminated against because they are the majority and discrimination involves power? Is it possible?
Absolutely. It is unequivocally possible. It happens all the time. This actually happens not only in specific instances, but this happens in a systemic way on our most elite college campuses. And I would also say that this is happening not just in education, but in the workplace.
Well, is it justified, though? Because if there has been disparity and if there has been discrimination, if there have been minorities that have been excluded for years and years and years and years, is this the way to start to bring some balance and diversity back to those universities and workplaces?
Absolutely not. Affirmative action has been going on for over 50 years, so this has been happening for a long time. And even now, we've actually seen that it's gotten worse in the sense that race relations are so poisonous. And many people on college campuses actually feel like because of all of this that's happening, they feel like they're being pitted against each other.
Doctor, what do you think?
Well, I think I would very respectfully disagree. I certainly don't think that white people are disadvantaged in college admissions. In fact, I would say it is the exact opposite, which is why there are policies and practices in place now to try to alleviate the historical burden. It's like if you ever played Monopoly before, right? Imagine like you have a person who's playing Monopoly and they get to go around multiple times, right? And then like halfway through the game, someone gets to enter into the game. And then because they get a turn, right, then the accusation is, well, somehow that game is unfair. The kind of accusation, what we would say is reverse racism, we really just view it as what we call race sliding. Race sliding is what happens when gaslighting is racial. And essentially, if you look historically, colleges and universities have prioritized admissions for students who are white. Why is that? When you admit a student, it's oftentimes based upon your grades, high school grades, and your test scores, ACT and SAT, which are being phased out due to COVID-19. But if you think about it, the SAT and ACT have historically measured access to resources, the neighborhood that you grow up in. It is not a measure of a student's drive, a student's motivation. It is really a measure of their access. And ultimately, we know that when things measure access, they really measure white privilege.
Candace, are we compromising standards if we do that? Because
She's saying Black Americans are just as capable as anyone else of succeeding on their own without needing special treatment. Affirmative action, while it might mean well, can come off like it's saying, you can't do it without our help. And that's not exactly empowering. It's like giving someone a trophy before the race even starts.
are we compromising standards if we do that because we haven't fixed the problem down the line?
That's correct. It is the policies are harmful also to the people that they purport to help. And we have all of the evidence there to look at. When you artificially place a Black American into a school in which they do not belong based on their knowledge, doesn't mean that they go on to get A's. In fact, there was a Black adjunct professor, you guys have definitely heard of him, Dr. Thomas Sowell, who was teaching at Cornell University, and he found that the majority of the Black American students that were there were on academic probation. Now, these students were some of the smartest in the nation, but because they were artificially placed amongst their peers at Cornell University, they were failing on academic probation. These policies have never helped Black Americans. It's just basically policies that are put in place to make people feel good, right? I feel like I'm doing something when in fact I'm actually creating harm. You either know the answers or you don't.
When you say, hey, we have Black students at a particular school who aren't performing at that school as well, the immediate assumption that you're making is, well, maybe it's because they're not smart enough, they're not good enough, or they don't belong here. Whereas it could be about the experience that they're having at that institution. Professors who believe that they're not intelligent enough, that they don't have the capability to do the work, that they see them as criminals, deviants, dangerous, up to no good, or they talk about them with the they statements. They're lazy, they don't care, they don't really belong here. They're only here for the financial aid.
I'm giving you actual facts.
No,
right?
I'm giving you actual facts based on extensive
you can say, well, maybe they just don't feel good.
Done.
But that's not the case. I mean, I went to university. I did not feel good, right? I didn't pull the best grades in high school, probably got into a better university than I should have gotten into based on my performance in high school. It wasn't because of my feelings. It's because I wasn't focused on it. And that we're talking about a cultural problem, what's going on back at home, as was in my circumstance. And none of that is because of institutionalized policy. It almost seems like you guys refuse to accept that, Black students aren't performing well. You feel like you have to have this burden of responsibility when in fact, if you actually wanted to help, you would look at the facts, re-examine the fact that it's not helping anybody. It's not helping Black Americans to artificially place them into universities, and you'd make effective change.
But you're making the assumption that Black students are academically inferior, and they're not.
No,
they're some of our most brilliant students
that's
that we
the
have.
basic. No. That you are making the assumption that they are inferior.
You just said that they don't belong there.
Policies. I'm talking about the students that are based on the policies that you are defending right now, saying that we should have these policies that let them into these universities, not based on their skill set, but based on the color of their skin. So you are assuming that they are inferior.
Comedian Tyler Fisher claims he has been turned down by 3 agencies because they said they just weren't looking for white men to book at this time. Tyler, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I do identify as a Latino female now, so just adjust my pronouns. So I've been in the entertainment business for 17 years, and I think what we're not talking about is children right now. Thank God I had about 5 years where this was not happening, where race was not pounded over your head. This is destroying people's lives. Yeah. The manager that told me, I can't work with you because you're white, he was a pawn, And so it's so sad because I feel so bad for kids who won't have that chance. They're going to go, oh, I'm told I'm white, so I'm not going to go for it. What would you say to a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, no matter what their race is? What would you actually tell them? Should you give your job up? And let me ask you directly, do you think it was justified for me to be told we can't represent you. You don't have the chance to now compete for jobs because you're white. Yes or no? Was that okay or was that not okay?
I think that what is described
Yes
by
or no?
you.
Don't give me your little.
Well, no,
like,
let me
bubble
finish.
wrap.
What
Yes
is described
or
by
no?
you, someone telling you that you can't get that job because you're white, does not sound right to me.
I did a show the other day, and they said, "Are you doing the next show?" And I said, "Yeah." The guy said, "I didn't know you were gay." He said, "This is a gays only show." And so that's why Hollywood sucks right now, by the way, because they're not hiring based on talent. What do we do about heart surgeons, airplane pilots? Like, how far do we want to go with this? Do you want the best heart surgeon, or do you want somebody who you think may have had it bad as a kid, or maybe their great-great-grandfather? I mean, it's ridiculous.
I think it's important to state how affirmative action actually harms everybody involved. So when you put a black student on a campus or put them in a job and you've given them, preferential treatment in order for them to be there, you've actually robbed them of knowing they've gotten an opportunity based on their own merit. So they're questioning themselves and their place in the environment. And for all the non-people of color who are surrounding them, they now get to look at any person of color and go, I don't know whether or not you got this job based on merit or based on preferential treatment. And I know this to be true because I'm a biracial woman who has those thoughts now because of the culture that we're living.
Candace is calling out the idea that these policies might actually do more harm than good because they push the narrative that minorities need a boost to compete. She's flipping the argument, saying real equality means treating everyone the same and letting people prove themselves based on their own merit. Whether you agree or not, she's making a pretty straightforward case for fairness and self-respect.
Dr. Wood, you say that white teachers cannot conduct classrooms as successfully as black teachers.
What? That's crazy.
That's really only true with students of color, correct?
So what I would say is that when we
What's what you did say?
Well, what I say is that when we look at teachers who are the most effective with teaching our most underrepresented students, they tend to be individuals who come from underrepresented backgrounds. But the reason that they're also effective also with white students as well is because oftentimes your faculty of color aren't solely focused just on the cognitive, but also on the relational. Because relationships are a foundational precondition to effective teaching, learning, counseling, advising, or any support practice. Said differently, it doesn't matter how good you teach. If you don't have a relationship with a student, you won't be as effective as you could be. And our faculty of color and staff of color tend to do that.
You're talking about the art of teaching. You're talking about building relationships. They are actually failing when it comes to actually teaching these kids things. This is why
who's failing?
I'm telling you, inner city communities. I'm talking about Baltimore, Minneapolis, Los Angeles. All the inner city communities are failing black children because they're focusing on the art and not the actual facts. In Baltimore,
We're
as
talking
just
about
one
teacher
example,
diversity, though. You're referring to the full density of the school.
I'm talking about the art of teaching, which you're saying they're better for the student. They're actually not better for the student, right?
So you're saying that
Across
faculty of
5
color are not
schools in
effective?
Baltimore, which is an inner city, which focuses, I suppose, on the art of teaching, they couldn't find a single child that was proficient in reading and writing because they think that having somebody who looks like you somehow means that it's going to be better. And also, please, I have to clarify this because when we talk about these quotas and someone says, well, there's this many white people teaching and there's this many black people teaching, welcome to America. Black Americans, okay, I don't know how everybody's doing in their math these days. Black Americans represent just 13% of the population, okay, right? White Americans represent 60% of the population, okay? So if you walk into a room and you find that there's only 13% of the room that is Black American and 60% of the room is white American, you are actually walking into a room that is holistic.
We were talking about what's happening in industry as well.
I can see your point.
And
She was making a good point.
Coca-Cola is getting a lot of attention for some of their sensitivity training with their employees. And your comment was that, in part, they're teaching some of their employees how, I say some, the white employees, how to be, quote, less white.
Absolutely.
How the hell do you do that?
Well, she took me out tanning this morning. She just kind of walked me around Hollywood.
Oh, you should be a comedian.
Well, I'd like to make the point that it's not just Coca-Cola that is engaging in this sort of activity and
I'm
these
just
sort of
using that as an
trainings.
example.
Yeah, it's a great example, and it's happening in corporations and in schools all across America, and they are effectively teaching people. Coca-Cola said, quote, how to be less white. They assume that things like being a perfectionist, engaging in or having a response to objectivity, having a neutral or a nuclear family, these are inherently extensions of whiteness.
Listening to John Mayer.
According to Coca-Cola, these are extensions of whiteness, and they actually engaged in trainings where they taught their employees how to be less white.
Wait, what are extensions of whiteness?
That if we're going to create this kind of balance at the university level or in industry, then we're going to have to create opportunities early on so everybody comes to that place where they're competing for the place in the university or the job with some kind of competitive equality. They've got the same educational background, they've got the same opportunities behind them, and if we don't fix that, I don't think we're ever going to get what we're trying to artificially create.
Candace Owens didn't hold back, and she made it clear. True equality isn't about lowering the bar for anyone. It's about believing in everyone's ability to succeed on their own. She called out the idea that treating people differently because of their race helps. It doesn't. It just reinforces stereotypes and creates more division. Love her or hate her, you've got to admit, she knows how to spark a conversation and challenge the status quo. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stick around for more.